And I think that's a really key message here, that because we've left it so late, every day of failure makes tomorrow much, much harder. Whichever way you look at this, whether it's 1.5 or 2 degrees centigrade, whether it's Sweden, the UK, the US, Australia, Japan, wherever, this is profound and immediate change in our system in so many respects, way above what governments are ever prepared to talk about. And as I say, I don't particularly like these conclusions, but that's what comes out of the arithmetic. Now, why is this so different to what we hear from our governments? And this, I think it's this language of net zero is just hugely. It'll take a while to come through again, sorry. It's hugely important here. So this is a phrase that hopefully you're all quite familiar with. If you're in the UK, we hear it everywhere. No one, whether it's academics or newsreaders or everyone, they talk about net zero. You say, what do you mean by that? And almost no one knows what they mean by it. They're just using the language because it's become common. So the IPCC didn't use this at all in AR5 in the way that we think about it now in terms of our whole economy. They only used it in relation to passive houses. But in fact, looking at an AR6, then it's used about 1,000 times. And it's all to do with this sort of negative emissions and really passing the burden on to future generations. The Committee on Climate Change in the UK, that in many respects coined this in their 5th budget report in 2015. It wasn't used once. In their 2020 report, it was used between 3,000 and 5,000 times. We just use it now without stopping to think. And that academics do that, I think, is a disgrace, because if academics aren't prepared to think, they should sack themselves and go and get a different job. So our job is to think. So we should not be using language in that sort of loose fashion that we are. Fine to use it if you've really thought it through. But what does it do? It embeds substitution. And as soon as you see substitution, you know that there'll be unscrupulous policymakers thinking, aha, we can get out of jail card free here. So it allows you to swap between the greenhouse gases, between carbon dioxide and methane or nitrous oxide. It allows you to swap sources. So you can swap carbon dioxide from cars to fertilizer from nitrous oxide from fertilizer. It allows you to cross decades. So you can have a flight today. That's okay because we'll plant some trees in the north of Sweden in 2030 that will absorb the carbon dioxide. So it assumes that a ton is a ton is a ton, which is great from an accountancy point of view on a spreadsheet. But in reality, they've got different chemistries, they're different atmospheric lifetimes, and big different levels of certainty and risk between these things. So I keep forgetting it's been delayed. The other thing it does, it embeds in huge quantities of carbon dioxide removal. There are no scenarios out there, the high-level scenarios, that do not assume this. And by this, I mean we're expecting future generations, well, our own children and future generations, to absorb huge quantities of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, either through technologies that barely exist today, just at small pilot schemes, or in some academics' imagination, or so-called nature-based solutions as well. You dismiss that. It's probably doing it on Zoom, all your live comments come through. And the scale of this must not be underestimated. Remember, this isn't every single major model. We're talking about hundreds of billions of tons of carbon dioxide removal are assumed in the future when we're all retired or dead. Hundreds of billions of tons. So roughly the same size as the current global oil and gas industry. So it's an industry that doesn't exist, that every scenario assumes will look as big as the oil and gas industry today. It's that sort of scale. And so they don't exist today at any scale. Yes, I think, I won't go through this in length, but yes, I think we should research these things and possibly deploy them if they meet very stringent ecological and social sustainability criteria, but let's reduce our emissions, assuming they won't work. And anyway, agricultural emissions, we will not get down to zero. From my understanding, we cannot eliminate all agricultural emissions. Even if the whole world went vegan and we had no-till ploughing a field, so we didn't plough our fields, then you still have a lot of emissions, particularly, I think, increasingly from nitrous oxide, as we have to put more fertilizer on to get better yields to feed more people, and particularly with the changing climate. So energy has to be real zero. There's no neat way out of that, but all the scenarios assume lots more energy use, fossil fuel energy use rather, way into 2050 and beyond. It's also seen to be a policy, this is the strongest argument a lot of people make, as a political argument, that it's a